Welcome in. Today we're doing a deep dive into open banking.
Oh, yeah,
It's a hot topic.
absolutely.
And for good reason. We're going to really try to get to the bottom of how this tech could revolutionize how we deal with our money day to day.
It's exciting stuff. And you know what I think is really cool about open banking? It's not really about one specific technology.
Yeah.
It's more about a power shift.
Interesting.
Yeah, giving you more control over your own financial data.
I like the sound of that. But for our listeners who aren't familiar, can we back up a bit?
Sure.
What exactly are we talking about when we say open banking?
Well, imagine this. You're opening a new bank account and...
I hate that process.
Right, so much paperwork, right. So much waiting around. Open banking wants to make that whole thing a distant memory.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Instead of digging out those old statements, you could just give your new bank permission to get what they need directly from your current bank.
Directly.
Securely. Just a few clicks, instant verification, faster approvals, way less hassle.
Okay, streamlining is good. I'm on board so far. But let's say I am on board with this whole open banking thing.
Yeah.
What happens after that initial setup? What's the long game here?
That's where it gets really interesting. Imagine financial products and services that are hyper-personalized just for you. Think about getting advice or alerts like, hey, there's a better savings rate available before you even have to think about it.
Now, that would be amazing.
Right. No more reacting to your finances. Open banking helps you anticipate your needs and optimize in real time.
Okay, so it's kind of like having a personal financial assistant in your pocket.
Exactly. And let's not forget about security. Open banking can be a game changer for fraud prevention.
Oh, how so?
It allows for real-time monitoring of your transactions. So if something fishy happens, you'll know about it instantly.
Okay, so we're talking about real peace of mind.
Absolutely.
This all sounds amazing, like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Right.
Was this really happening now?
Oh yeah, it's already happening. Europe's been leading the way with something called PSD2. It basically pushes banks towards this whole secure data sharing thing.
Interesting.
It's not just Europe, though. Similar frameworks are popping up all over the place, Asia Pacific, the Middle East. The whole world is catching on to how big of a deal open banking could be.
A global financial revolution. That's a really interesting way to put it. But anytime we're talking about big changes, especially when it comes to something as sensitive as our money, you have to ask about the challenges.
Of course.
Data privacy and security in particular. What are we doing to make sure people's information is protected?
That is the million-dollar question, right? And you're right to be concerned about it. Robust regulation is key here. We need clear guidelines and stringent security protocols to make sure that your data is being handled responsibly and ethically.
So it's not just about the technology working.
Right.
It's about making sure it's used responsibly.
Exactly. And a big part of that is consent. You get to decide who has access to your information and what they can do with it.
So it's like a digital handshake, but with much higher stakes.
Exactly. 100%. Transparency is key. You should always know who's got access to your data and what they're using it for.
No surprises.
No surprises. That's the goal.
So it's like a win-win for both sides, making things smoother for me and giving the bank a more complete picture of my financial situation.
Exactly. It's all about making those connections smoother and more secure.
This begs the question, though, how do traditional banks feel about this whole open banking thing? Are they threatened or excited?
You know, it's a mixed bag. Some traditional institutions, they definitely see open banking as a challenge.
Yeah, like a disruption.
Yeah, like disrupting the way they've always done things. But here's the interesting thing. It's also a huge opportunity.
Oh, I like the sound of that. Opportunity. How so?
Think about it. With open banking, banks suddenly have access to way more data, and not just any data, but real-time data.
Right.
They can use that to develop way more sophisticated and personalized products and services.
Like what?
Imagine getting pre-approved for a mortgage in like minutes based on your actual up-to-the-minute financial situation. No more relying on outdated credit scores.
That would be incredible.
Right. Or how about investment advice that is completely tailored to your risk tolerance and your financial goals, and it adjusts as your life changes?
No, that's what I call personalized service.
Exactly. It's less about replacing traditional banks and more about pushing them to up their game.
It's like competition breeds innovation.
100%. Open banking is here to shake things up in the financial services industry, make it more competitive, more innovative, and ultimately, it's the consumer who wins.
More choices, more transparency, a more personalized experience.
I like it.
That's the goal. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about how open banking works, its potential to reshape finance. For someone who's just starting to learn about this, What's the key takeaway? What should they remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that open banking is all about putting you back in control of your financial data.
Okay.
It's giving you the tools, the transparency to make smart choices about your money and to really benefit from a financial system that is finally catching up to the 21st century.
It's about empowerment. It's about taking control of your financial well-being.
Exactly.
That makes me wonder, though, does this idea of a more personalized, responsive financial system, does that look the same everywhere? We've talked about Europe leading the charge, but what about the rest of the world? Is there like a global rule book for open banking?
That's a great question, and the short answer is not really. While the overall goal is generally the same, promote secure data sharing, encourage innovation, the specific regulations and how they implement it, they vary quite a bit.
Makes sense.
Different countries, different regions are at different stages of this whole thing. It's not one size fits all, which is understandable given how complex these financial systems are around the world.
So it's less about a single blueprint, more like everyone's working towards a similar goal.
Yeah, exactly. A shared destination, but different roads to get there.
Right. Makes sense. Trying to create some kind of one-size-fits-all model for every financial system in the world.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be pretty impossible.
Pretty much.
Could you give us a quick tour? How are different parts of the world approaching open banking?
Sure. So as we talked about earlier, Europe really has been leading the charge with PSD2,
Right.
setting some high standards for data protection, consumer rights,
Yeah.
and that's had a big influence on regulations in other parts of the world, too. The UK, even post-Brexit, they're still a major player, constantly pushing the envelope.
Always innovating.
Yeah. And then you've got Australia. They're making some interesting moves with their consumer data, right?
I haven't heard of that.
It goes beyond just banking, covers things like energy and telecoms, too.
Wow, so they're really expanding the scope.
Absolutely. And over in the Asia-Pacific region, you've got places like Singapore and Hong Kong.
Okay.
Really going all in on open banking, lots of partnerships between traditional banks and fintech startups.
Trying to make things happen.
Exactly. Then there's the U.S. They've historically been a bit more cautious.
Yeah, more cautious in general.
Right. But we're starting to see them move toward a more regulated open banking environment with a big focus on consumer protection.
It's a lot of variety out there.
Yeah, a lot of different approaches.
But it sounds like ultimately everyone is working toward the same goal.
Yeah.
Making finance more open, more secure, better for the everyday person.
100%.
I want to touch on one last thing before we wrap up.
Sure.
We talked about it briefly earlier. Core banking.
Okay.
Can you remind us what that is and how it fits into this whole open banking world?
Of course. Think of core banking systems as like the engine room of a bank.
Okay.
They're the fundamental systems that handle all of the behind-the-scenes stuff. Opening accounts, processing transactions, all those essential functions.
The backbone.
Exactly.
So if core banking is like the engine, is it fair to say that open banking is kind of like upgrading the dashboard?
That's a great way to put it. Open banking isn't about ripping out those core systems and replacing them. It's about making them better, making them more efficient, more interconnected, more responsive to what today's consumers actually need.
Love that.
Yeah.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. We've really gone deep into what open banking is, how it works, the tech behind it, the global impact, and frankly, what it means for the future of how we all manage our money.
For sure.
But if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from all of this, it's this. Open banking, it's not just some techie buzzword.
Right.
It's a fundamental shift in how we interact with our finances, a movement towards greater transparency, more control, and a truly personalized experience.
I completely agree.
So next time you hear about open banking, remember this conversation. It's not just about technology, it's about putting you back in the driver's seat when it comes to your financial well-being. That's it for our deep dive today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and most importantly, keep learning.